Hello, welcome to the lesson overview video for MyStar's Remote Learning Lesson number 8, Data Analysis. I'm Geerer, a middle school science teacher in Grosse Pointe and a MyStar professional learning facilitator. I'm here to introduce you to the lesson and different options to make it easy to teach the lesson, regardless of whether you are in a fully virtual classroom, face-to-face, or somewhere in between. Many teachers worry they will need to have their students use a lot of apps and technology in class if they teach synchronously. You'll only need 3: Google Docs, Slides, and Jamboard. Once your students have these mastered, you can add other apps if you'd like. Now let's dig into the lesson. We'll begin with the anchor phenomena and the goal for the lesson. Students begin this lesson by wondering about litter in their neighborhood. How can we find out where it's coming from? How can we communicate what we find to try to reduce the amount of litter in our neighborhoods? The goal is that by the end of this lesson, students will be able to determine which representation of data best answers a particular question, and they'll be able to draw conclusions and indicate relationships from the representation of a data set to define a problem. We use a simple context with local hands-on activity, collecting data about litter in your own neighborhood, so that the focus here is on students learning to use the science practice of analyzing data while working with multiple forms of evidence, rather than mastering new disciplinary content. In other words, in this lesson, the learning focus isn't on the DCIs, it's on the SCPs. In the anchor phase, students are presented with a lesson scenario. A local cleanup committee has suggested that middle school students are creating the most litter in their community. How can they defend themselves? And how can they help others reduce litter? Students generate their ideas in breakout rooms using a common Google Doc. Ideally, they will suggest collecting their own litter data and presenting it in charts or graphs to local leaders. In the Uncover, they consider how best to communicate the litter data that they've collected. Should they use a bar graph, a data table, or a pie graph in their slide presentation to local leaders? To practice, students compare Michigan Adopt-A-Beach data from several beaches displayed in several ways. Students share their thoughts about data analysis and decide that bar graphs, tables, and pie graphs each have unique characteristics for communicating data. Collectively, they decide on definitions for each data tool. Finally, students use the litter data they collected in the anchoring experience to help them defend against the claim that middle schoolers are responsible for most of the trash in the community. They look for patterns in their trash data and determine which graphical representation of the data will best support their message. They construct a presentation to communicate their findings to the mayor at the next city council meeting. Where is our litter coming from? Is it mostly from middle school students or another source? And what can people do to reduce litter in our community? The check your progress, which may be omitted in completely asynchronous instruction, has students check their ability to analyze data and use it to communicate a message effectively. Students consider litter data from P.J. Hoffmaster State Park, looking for patterns and making recommendations about how best to communicate their findings. Here are some specific options for different types of instruction. Whether your instruction is completely asynchronous in a virtual synchronous classroom, a face-to-face socially distanced classroom, or a hybrid of one or more of these options. For completely asynchronous instruction, there is a separate version of the student guide that can be supplied to students as a printed packet or digitally in a Google Classroom. This version of the student guide takes students through all 4 phases of the lesson and includes more context and explicit instructions for activities, since the teacher will not be there to explain this to students. This version omits the check your progress, which you can use if you feel students need more practice with analyzing data. For online synchronous or hybrid instruction, the lesson is easily adapted using a few simple tools such as Google Slides and Jamboard for group meetings. Some parts of the lesson lend themselves to working together as a class or in breakout rooms, while meeting in Zoom or Google Hangouts. Other parts will work better for asynchronous days or homework in between synchronous sessions. We have some slides, Jamboards, and student guides prepared to get you started. For face-to-face instruction in a socially distanced setting, students will need their own laptop, computers, or Chromebooks to connect to Jamboard or Google Slides in place of writing group ideas on butcher paper or whiteboards. The neighborhood litter data could be collected during class by walking around school grounds, or it could be assigned as a home activity. Here's a sample flowchart for hybrid or mixed virtual classrooms. To recap, the anchor part of this lesson has been adapted for a synchronous session, whether online in a virtual classroom or in a socially distanced classroom. Students share their thoughts in the breakout rooms using Google Docs. The homework following the anchor is designed to be asynchronous, but could be adapted. Students will collect data about their own neighborhood litter on a student guide, and an optional homework assignment asks students to review data collected in a Michigan neighborhood. The Uncover and Share activities are set up on Jamboards. Students work together in breakout groups to compare the best uses for data tables, bar graphs, and pie graphs, and share their responses. Asynchronously, students can then practice what they've learned by analyzing Adopt a Beach litter data for 2 Lake Michigan beaches in a student guide. There is an optional student guide for practicing calculating percentages as well. The Connect phase is flexible. Students could be assigned to create their own slide or poster, or they may work in small groups. This work can take place during synchronous or asynchronous instruction. If possible, students should share their finished slides during a synchronous class meeting. The Check Your Progress phase is also flexible. It should be done as an individual check on student understanding. However, it can be done in a face-to-face or synchronous class or as homework. The MyStar team hopes you find this lesson engaging for your students and easy to adapt to your unique situation. Thank you for watching.